Welcome to Unmuted, the podcast where we speak the truth we were trained to hide. I'm Gillian Ray, the Sovereign Poet, and today I have got an absolutely fantastic guest for you. But before we get into it, I want to wish you all a Happy New Year. Happy New Year, and tell you about some of the amazing things that we've got going on in the Unmuted Lounge this month. I'm really excited to have opened this speakeasy. It's hosted inside the lounge and it's for women who want to go deeper. It's started already. We've got a small group of powerful women as founder members, and we're spending this month looking at the different ways that good girl shows up in our lives. There's journaling sessions and a monthly coaching circle to go deeper. Now, it's not too late to join, and the founders member rate has been extended. I've got 15 places left at the founders rate, so if you've been thinking about joining for a while, now is the perfect time. And on that note, let's get into the episode. Today on Unmuted, I'm talking with someone who has literally painted over 3,000 women into goddesses. I mean, I'm not talking theory here, talking full color, unapologetic. Kat Shaw is an activist artist who refused to shrink her mission and is helping women reclaim their bodies and stop apologizing for their existence. So, her art is saying what so many of us have been taught to hide, that our bodies in all their glory are worthy of love and reverence and being seen. So let's just dive into it, Kat. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It seems like we're a perfect alignment in our thoughts and in our beliefs and in our views. And do you know what? As women, so many more of us need to step into this space
Yeah.
and shout and scream. And I paint, you do podcasts. Our voices are so important in whichever channel we use. So well done you for being in this space as well, because it's not an easy space to be in, always being up against the patriarchy and trying to be silenced and this, that, and the other. So yeah,
It's
that's
not an
me.
easy space to be in. You're absolutely right. And I mean, at least people can kind of press mute on me and like you don't have to listen to my podcast. But I think like when you're doing the activist part of it and you're getting out there and your work is visual and it's confronting people, right? Straight away, they're like, okay, let's just start from the beginning. How did you get into this? How did you even start just thinking, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is the way that I want to move through the world.
Right. There's a very, very, very long story, and I won't
Okay.
go fully into detail, but basically I'm up to nearly 3,500 women now as well,
Wow.
and 100 vulvas, as you can see in the background. So about 7, probably 8 years ago, I had started dieting when I was 13. I was always trying to shrink my body. I was in the belief system that the majority of women are, that our bodies aren't acceptable or lovable or worthy unless they look like the ones in the magazines. Heavily filtered, heavily airbrushed, heavily photoshopped. So I was in that life. I thought that's how we had to be. I'm 6'1" and I was desperate to be a size 10. I've regained this size 10 figure since I was 13, and it was daily exercising, for punishment, to shrink, eating or not eating the foods in order to shrink. And it got to about 7 years ago, and there was a really big catastrophe in my life that stopped me going out the house. It stopped every single thing in its tracks, really. It was a massive spanner, and I was eating and not able to exercise. And all of a sudden, I'd put on this weight, and I was so disgusted with myself. I was absolutely horrified by the back rolls and this perfect size 10 figure that had crucified me for years and years and years and years, up until my early 40s, had finally gone. It gone, and I'm there going, fuck, I've let myself go. The self-hatred was
Mm.
just so potent in me, and I was going through a really, really, really crappy time. And all of a sudden I just suddenly thought, you know what, this life is really difficult. The life I was in at the time was really, really difficult, and hating myself isn't going to help. So I started to look at myself naked for the first time ever, 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 ever. Because even when I was that perfect size 10, I still hated my body. I still looked at it and I still picked apart bits of it, even though it was teeny tiny. I had like bones sticking out, and still I found fault in my body. So I started looking at myself naked for the first time ever, and really saw myself. And it took weeks, it took months, with tears rolling down my face, thinking this is disgusting. I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at the way my body moves, and my belly, and my love handles and all these things. And like muffin top, you see that all the time in magazines. Well, look, they've got a muffin top. And I started to draw myself, and I drew myself over and over and over and over again, through my eyes, not through the male gaze, or not through the perfect vision of women in magazines. And then I would add glitter, and then I would add the colors, and I would start to make the paintings look really, really beautiful. And then I was like, actually, this is my body. I was really out of my body. I wasn't embodied at all as a woman. I wasn't embodied in my sacred flesh. I wasn't embodied, because I was so numb to my body. To me, it was just something that had to be smaller and smaller and smaller to look good, in order to be lovable. So I started making these paintings look beautiful, and for me, that was the bridge between coming back into my body, seeing myself, knowing myself, realizing that the paintings were me, and that my body could also be beautiful, and that it moved in different ways. And I used to take videos of myself. I used to draw, first of all, from first hand observations.
Yeah.
I'd be looking in the mirror and I'd be drawing, and then I started drawing from photos of myself. And I'd put the video on portrait mode, and I'd just move my body, and all the different movements my body made, and I'd then screenshot that. And to watch those over and over again was really quite fascinating. It then became this, rather than look at what my body isn't. It isn't a perfect shape. It does have cellulite. It is, you know, I was looking at my body as what it was. It was sacred. It moved me every day. It held me. It held this heart of mine that had been through so much. And it really became this experience of embodying back into my body, and recognizing my body, and seeing her as sacred, seeing her as a warrior. Like, what a warrior, what we'd been through. Anyway, and then a friend of mine was like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm on this journey to love my body. And I'd been looking at other art to see if anyone represented me, goddess art. I follow the path of the goddess, and no goddess art represented me and my body. It was beautiful, but it
Yeah.
was all very ethereal and very whimsical, and very, the nipples are up here and the waist is this big. So my friends were like, oh, can you paint me as well? Because I hate my body. And I was like, oh my God, do you really? And then this opened the dialogue with lots and lots of different friends, that all these women were walking around hating their bodies, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, not feeling lovable, not feeling, and their mental health was so bad, because we were constantly depriving our bodies of joy, any kind of, living in this beautiful body, because we were all trying to shrink in order to fit into society. So then I drew my friend, and then another friend was like, oh, can you draw me? Can you draw me? And that's how it all began. It snowballed from then. And 3,500 women later, and various art projects later, I'm still really, really, really passionate about enabling women to love their bodies by representing every single type of body, because we don't see cellulite in magazines, or if we do, it's negative. Oh, she's let herself go, look at the cellulite on her. Or we don't see women aging. I mean, you look at the recent press about Pamela Anderson, who now doesn't wear makeup, and
Oh
everyone's
my
going, oh,
God.
she's
Yeah.
disgusting, she's so my vision was to empower as many women as possible by showing all these different bodies made beautiful, and made into goddesses, and made into this amazing platform to celebrate every single body shape. And then over the years, when it's like this thing, when you start scratching at the surface. So first of all, I started off as, oh, I'm into body love and women loving themselves. And then I started thinking, hang on a minute, why do women not love themselves? But what's the narrative? Who began that narrative? The patriarchy. So then I went down this rabbit hole. So yes, my artwork has snowballed, but also my activism has snowballed, because it started as body love, which it still is, representation of all
Yes.
women, but then it's become more fundamental in women's voices, because not only are our bodies shamed, our voices are shamed, our opinions are shamed, we don't have equality. Violence against women and girls is a national crisis in the UK. So all this biggest vile, horrible stuff started to rear its ugly head that I didn't even know. Like 8 years ago, I didn't even know what the patriarchy was. Since the day I was born, I was brainwashed and I didn't realize. And when I decided to step out of that paradigm, life becomes really difficult, because every single thing you look at is not equal for women. Women's voices are silenced, and it becomes this. Even things like, I had an ADHD diagnosis about 8 years ago, and the gender gap in neurodivergence, and the gender gap in medical. I'm going through the menopause. The gender gap here is so every single thing I look at nowadays is, hang on a minute, it's not equal, it's not okay. So that's the very short journey to where I am now. So yes, I still talk about body love and empowerment, and re-embodying women into their glorious, glorious bodies. Not even love yourself regardless of your shape. I'm about love yourself because of your shape.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
so many people are like, oh, I just
Yes.
love, yeah, I might be bigger, but I love myself anyway. And I'm like, no, no, don't love yourself regardless. Love yourself because of,
Yes.
because of the fullness that you are, or because we're taught to be too big or too small, or you're too loud, or you're too quiet, or you're too slutty, or you're too prudish, or so
It's the twos, isn't it? All the
empowerment.
time. It's whatever two that someone's saying to you. It's like, no, you
I
are not
know.
too much. You are not too little. You're not too
Yeah,
quiet. You're not too big. Whatever you are, that is you. That is who you are. And how do you
yeah,
learn to embrace that? And obviously, in a similar sort of way with my work, it's been about voice. And I genuinely just thought that so I'm a poet, and I'd been writing poet for like 20 years in my notebook, didn't want to share anyone, didn't want to take up space. And then I thought, you know what? No, I started to take up space, and then you realize everyone comes to you and saying, "Oh, I do that too," or "I have stuff that I haven't shared," or "I've always wanted to do this," and you think we're all doing it. All of these women, we're all doing it, and we're all like, we're, we're not alone, and that's why the work that you're doing is so important as well, because we're not alone. We think we are in our own
yeah.
heads. We think we're the only people that feel like this, but we're not. It's most women are going through it.
A lot of women are also touched by the patriarchy, because being a fierce feminist like I am, I get so many vile inboxes from men who are like, "You hate men. It's not all men. You're slagging off men." And I'm like, "No, no, no." You know, I also get a lot of those from women saying, "Yes, but blah blah blah." The
Yeah.
patriarchy is poison, and it poisons not just men. And to me, feminism isn't about hating men. I love men, but there's a difference between misogyny, and
Yeah.
there's a difference between men. There's a difference between banter and rape culture, and there's a difference between men. The divine masculine is completely different to the misogynistic masculine. And this is what I'm always trying to call out every day. I'm still empowering women to love their bodies, because that's the root of us on a personal journey. But on this collective women's journey that we're all on, we have to be doing it together. Women have to be aware just as much as men of the effects that the patriarchy has on them. Our
Mm.
our ingrained beliefs that we all have, and the way that we talk, and the way, I caught myself a year or so ago, after having done this work for so long, I caught myself looking at someone in the street going, "Oh, look what they're wearing." And then I was like, that's not my thought.
Yes.
I'm 50 next month, and I'm still unpicking what's mine and what society has drip fed into my soul. So it's a real journey, and it's
Yeah.
waking up every day consciously, being aware of my shadows as well. And
Mm.
when I talk to women, and when I do my events and my workshops and my circles as well as my art, I'm really of the view that I'm not sorted in any way. I'm not like,
Oh,
look at me, I'm sorted, I love my body, and I'm blah 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 blah. I'm just as messed up as everyone, you know. I'm still, some days I wake up and I'm still like, oh, I hate my body, look how I look in this. I do pole as well,
Yeah,
which is a whole nother
I'd love to
discussion.
hear more about
And I
that, but
lost
yeah.
my teaching job because of pole, but I
Mm,
video my pole lessons every week. And yesterday I was looking at the pole going, oh, look at that roll, you know, look at this bit of fat under your arm here
mm,
when you're doing this
yeah.
particular move. And so it's still, I'm still rewriting this narrative in my brain every single day. And it's only from women, you know, like you and me and other women coming together that
Yes.
we will be able to make this conscious shift. You know, we'll be able to hopefully infiltrate as many women as we can, because it's so important.
It is so important, and like what you're saying is like I'm 52, and I only really sort of went on this path very recently in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and that was because I kept saying, I was at my mum's and I kept saying, oh God, I'm fat, oh I'm so fat, and she was my mum was almost crying. She was going, don't say that, don't say that, because like as far as she was concerned, I'd been through this awful journey of having had breast cancer, and she's like, why are you criticizing yourself, you know, you're beautiful to me. And then I kind of got in a bit of an argument with her because, you know, she used to be a Weight Watchers leader, and, you know, all of our lives we had all of this sort of knowing about what was the ideal weight and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but and that's when I realized this is not just about me, it's not just about magazines, this is generational. It's come down from one
Yeah,
generation to another. And I've got
yeah,
daughters, I've got three daughters, and I know I've already said things to them that they've been hearing. And so it's maybe a bit late for me, but I work for them, but like I want them to be the next generation that are not passing that on. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Because you have a
Yeah, it's
daughter
so
as well.
important. My daughter's 20. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
turning 21 at the beginning of next year. And she was the not she was the spanner in the works. She
Mm,
wasn't, but she got very ill.
mm,
Um, which is what began all of this. You know, I was a teacher.
yeah.
We used to, she used to play netball up to regional level. I was in a netball team. We played netball together every single night. There'd be netball, there'd be training. In the morning I'd be running. We did Krav Maga. You know, life was like that for both of us. And then she went through this horrid medical issue, which meant that we were both housebound, which is how this all began. You know, we
Mm,
weren't
mm,
exercising, we couldn't eat healthily. I'm a single mom. I live on my own with her, you know. So this is how it began. And it one of the main reasons was because of her, because she obviously, also she was 13 at the time, so she was going from this child into, through adolescence into a woman, so her body was changing anyway. And also she wasn't exercising, we weren't eating properly, she was ill. And she could hear me saying, look at me, I've put on weight, I'm so disgusting, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And she was internalizing everything I was saying as well. You know, she went through quite severe body dysmorphia, you know. And I just thought, I've got to retrain myself to be able to retrain her. And it's, you know, it's taken a while, but she's different now. You know, we have these conscious conversations, we're very open, you know, we talk about bodies. She holds no shame in her body. I held shame in my body for many years, I still do, you
mm,
know, with the way it looks and stuff like that. You know, it's a journey, we're all on this journey, but it's important for my daughter. And every event I do, I did a big event in March for International Women's Day called Unapologetic, where we did a naked catwalk. There was 65 of us, and a big audience of 100. My daughter was in the audience, her boyfriend was in the audience. Well, he was doing the music because it was for women only, but he was in the background doing the music. And everything I say, I'm doing it for my daughter, I'm doing it for all women, I'm doing it for myself, I'm doing it for my daughter, and I'm doing it for my unborn granddaughters, because they are the women who will change the world. You know, my daughter's already an activist. She is so important. But I think of my mum. My mum's the same. We were going, you know, my mum took me to Weight Watchers at 13. She didn't know any different. She's always been on Weight Watchers. She still is. Before that, my nan, you know, this was the culture. When you look at, you know, I was watching this thing on the online the other day about women in the 80s and the things that were said to them in
mm.
the 80s, even the 90s, you know, even now,
Yeah.
but things that were said on telly, like, and I was watching the Victoria Beckham
Wait,
thing,
did you
and she
see
said
that
that
thing
she was
where they actually got her to stand on the scales
weighed on
just
the,
after
yeah,
she
on
just
the
had a
scales.
baby?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could, I
You
was
know, this
like,
is,
what?
I know, I know, and this is the culture that we live in, that
Yeah,
shaming women for
yeah,
their body image, or shaming women for their behavior, or shaming women for the clothes they wear, or the way they choose to live, or the way they act. This is the culture we live in, and it's just not okay. It's not okay anymore for us to live like that in our bodies, not loving our bodies, not accepting ourselves, but also what's really high up on my list of um activism is women having to modify their behavior because men don't understand. I've walked home. I have to tell my daughter, if you go out, put your hand over your drink. Have your keys in your hand. Don't ever be anywhere on your own. Don't walk at night. Walk into oncoming traffic, not the other way, so you can see if a car's going to. We shouldn't, as women, be unsafe in our bodies on this earth. And that is the bottom line of it, because of the patriarchy and because of the fact that we're not equal. Women aren't safe, and that's what uncovered on this journey for me, where it started off all beautiful and self-love and glittery and let's all love our bodies, and that is beautiful.
yes,
But underneath, the patriarchy is rotten, and it's poisonous, and that's the real area that we have to tackle, as well as all the beautiful stuff. And it's not all love and light. It's the darkness, and it's the shadow as well, and it's the real vileness underneath that feeds this narrative that women are not okay just as they are.
yeah.
Mm.
So how did you get involved in the activism part of it then? Did that just sort of come naturally after you started to be doing this work, or did you seek it out, or
No, I didn't seek it out. I didn't seek this life out at all. I sometimes like bash my head against the wall every day, like my soul contract. Why is this my
yeah,
soul contract?
yeah,
Because it's really fucking hard to live the life of an activist. It's
yeah,
hard. I'm always, there's always people against me. There's always like bah, 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 people trying to rip you down. My Facebook page with 65,000 followers was taken down last year because they didn't like it, because apparently, nakedness means sexual
mhm,
inappropriateness. So it didn't. I think it was after a couple of years of painting women's bodies. That's when I first started to get censored online. And I started to think, hang on a minute, why is my naked body or another woman's naked body only in two categories? It's either shameful and must be hidden, or it's sexual. Like, why is it that I cannot paint a naked woman empowered in her body without the male gaze and the patriarchy looking at it and labeling it sexual without my permission? This is and then I started thinking, actually, this isn't okay. I haven't given permission for them to sexualize my artwork. There's nothing sexual about it at all. Obviously, as women, we are sexual creatures if we choose to be,
absolutely.
and that is part of having a body and being in touch
Mm,
with your sensual side, but only when it's our choice. Whereas society aims and hides women's
mm,
nakedness, or it outrageously sexualizes it and deems it sexual. So that's when I started thinking, hold on a minute, this isn't okay. I'm painting women empowered, whereas you're sexualizing it, you're making it disgusting, you're making it for the male gaze. you know and then I started looking into the male gaze and how vile it was. My
mm.
things I didn't even think. When I was at school, we had a rule that we weren't allowed to wear patent shoes because the boys could see your knickers. How about
Yeah,
telling the boys to
I
stop
remember that.
fucking looking at the reflection in my patent shoes? I didn't realize that when I went for my ADHD diagnosis years ago,
Mm,
they test you on a scale that was made with boys in mind.
yes,
Still, nowadays, we're in 2025, and
yeah,
the tests for neurodivergence, for autism, for
yeah,
ADHD are tests that were written 20 years ago for boys. So a lot of
yeah.
girls slip through the net, a lot of women slip through the net because we don't have the testing in place. We're not taught how to pick up on neurodivergence in women. The menopause, more money spent on erectile dysfunction than on the menopause. This is so along the journey, the more you uncover, it's like going on holiday and then going, oh, now I want to go to 7 other places. That one place is never enough. You want
Yes,
more, you
yeah,
want more. And this is what it was like. But it was like the uncovering of all these layers of, oh, so many women don't love their bodies. hang on, so many women are sexualized. Hang on, so many women don't have equal rights. Hang on a minute, so many women are murdered by men. And it just keeps these layers just keep coming off, and it's more and more and more rotten. And obviously the world is changing so much at the moment. You look in America, you've got Trump, you've got the vile reform movement over here. So much. It's just terrifying, I think, to be a woman in this world. It's terrifying to be anybody unless you're a white, middle-aged cis man,
Yeah.
with
It's a,
money. That's
it's a,
the only
it,
that's the only place where you're safe in this world at the moment.
we were talking about ADHD a second ago and autism, and I used to be a school teacher as well, so I'm kind of like familiar with how it presents differently in girls and in boys. Um, but again, what I didn't really notice when I just thought, oh yeah, that's how it presents differently. But what if the reason it presents differently is because of this conditioning, because of how we raise our girls, because of how we say to them, be quiet, be good, and they're so conditioned to internalize it that they're not acting out like the boys do because the boys get permission to act out. So even from childhood, how we present in neurodivergence or medically and stuff is is restricted because of the way that everything's been written for men in the past. And
Yeah,
it's so important to start talking about these things and just to keep. And as I say, I like very similar to you. As I say, I started talking about poetry, and the next thing I know, I'm talking about unmuting from how I've always been like. I was the kind of person who didn't even like to ask people for help because I just didn't want to cause any trouble, didn't want to be a burden, just sit in the quiet at the back of the room. And I'm like, no, I have a right to take up space. We have a right, our voices take up space. But again, it's that danger, isn't it? And it's
yeah,
the danger isn't wrong. The reason we don't do it is because it feels dangerous. And the danger is, and that's when you start looking into that. Oh yeah, but we could do it. We could do it. And then you realize actually we could if we felt safe. And a lot of women don't feel safe. And why don't we feel
yeah.
safe? And that's that you it's like you're saying, but all these stones, you're picking them up and uncovering it, and you're like, oh, there's more, there's more, there's more. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was a teacher for 17 years, and I never, um, and all the special needs training I did, I never was specifically taught how to pick up autism in girls, for instance. So my daughter, after a mental breakdown, was diagnosed autistic at 16. I had no clue. I didn't have a clue, and I'd been a teacher for 17 years, and I was mortified, but I'd never, we'd been taught, sorry, I'll talk for me. I'd been taught that autism, you're very insular, you've got no eye contact, all your typical, oh, you remember dates and your typical Rain Man autism. We'd been taught at school, I'd been taught in my training that ADHD was boys bouncing around, can't sit still, knocking the chairs over, violent, and and autism was don't play with anyone. It's completely not that.
No.
And after 17 years, looking back on all of my special needs training, nothing was ever discussed about how it's potentially different in girls. I didn't have a clue until I realized that my daughter and myself were both neurodivergent. And then that was another stone, because it was like, oh my god, all these, why am I, I think I was diagnosed at like 40, must have been 43 or something like that, 44. Why has my life been so difficult? Why has my life been so difficult? And I've beaten myself up so much thinking that other people can do life and I can't. When actually, if it had been picked up earlier,
Mhm.
um, my life wouldn't have been so difficult. Why has my daughter had to have a mental breakdown for anyone to suggest, oh, she's got great eye contact. She's very sociable. She it doesn't display in any way that I thought autistic people, autistic people isn't even even the language that we were taught at school and
Yeah.
everything in these special needs. So that's another stone. There's all these stones, but it does come down, every single thing comes down to the patriarchy and the fact that we don't have equality. If women had equality, research would have been done on autism in women and we would have been aware of it. All these things, all boil down to, although they're different things like medical, menopause, neurodivergence, violence against women and girls, all comes down to the fact that women do not have equality with men, and that is because of the patriarchy. So it's all about constantly unpicking and calling it out and being that person that everyone goes, oh, here she goes again, she's on her soapbox again. But I am angry, I'm an
Yeah.
angry person. I had to learn to let go of silly anger, like, oh, someone's cut me up in the street, so I'm just going to be angry about them all day, because there's so much anger in me about misogyny and the patriarchy and women's rights, that I have to focus my anger there and drive it to change, rather than, otherwise I would just be like in a ball in the corner rocking and never able to move, so I have to use this anger to channel into trying to make the world a better place, even if it does make me public enemy number one with a lot of people, because you know women aren't meant to speak up, are they? They're not meant
No.
to be loud. They're not meant to question things. They're not meant to say to someone in the street, I don't want to smile. Who are you talking to? Hang on a minute, I was talking, all these things, calling out jokes. That is the bottom line. Women trying to stay alive in this world where they're not allowed to say to a man, I don't like what you've just said to me, because then the men turn nasty, and it's this modification of women having to modify their behavior, what they wear, what they say, how they act, to stay alive, is really something that drives me every day as well.
Other than obviously talking about it more, the artwork that you're doing, protesting, because obviously you used to be a teacher as well, and well, your voice in the classroom was silenced as well because of, so like our opportunity to speak to the next generation, or yours, not mine. I left on my left because I didn't want to do it anymore. But yeah, so yeah, your opportunity to speak to the next generation was taken away from you because of what? I mean, are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. So I lost my job teaching. It was
Yeah.
about a year ago, a year and a half maybe. And I had an amazing class. I've been a secondary school teacher, I've been a primary school teacher, I've been an art teacher. And I was at the time, I'd been at the school for 8 years, and I had an amazing year 5 class. And head teacher was one of my best friends. I started teaching with her 17 years ago. Well, probably 19 years ago now, because I haven't taught for a couple of years. But she knew me, and I've always used canon teacher, that the kids have the best time ever. They have the funnest time ever. They love coming to school every day. They do get taught academic stuff, but you never quite know I'm going to go. There's always, we're dancing on tables, or we're doing this, or we're doing, so she knows me very, very well, but she's always known, like, oh, where are we going? She's knew my job outside school. Anyway, my beautiful, beautiful year 5 class, I would teach them all the pagan sabbats as well, because I'd very openly was a pagan. I was very openly a witch, I'm very openly a goddess at the school. So I'd say, well, today's Beltane, and then we'd watch the sunrise over Glastonbury, while we were doing the register and stuff like that. So my kids had this amazingly enriching experience where they were taught by me, not just because of my words, but because of the way I acted, that they could show up for themselves every day, individual. They could say what they wanted as long as they weren't assholes. They could have an opinion that was different to someone else. They could they
Yes.
could dress differently. They could act differently. They could have different beliefs to the next person. Obviously, English schools are generally Church of England schools, which is fine. But that wasn't my opinion, and that was also okay. We were all welcomed in that school, and I used to really encourage them. We had crows as pets. We used to feed the crows every day, that used to come to our class, and the crows used to bring us gifts, and we used to give them food. And we'd do magic spells, and we'd do manifestation in class, and we'd stroke the plants. I had plants all around the class, and everyone there would be like this timetable to stroke the plants. So they were having an education, maths, English, history, science, but they were also learning these amazing life skills, that you can be different, and that's okay. And then obviously I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder where my collagen in my body isn't effective. It doesn't work effectively. So none of my connective tissue works, which causes loads and loads of issues. But one of the main ways it displays for me is through chronic pain.
Hmm.
and my joints dislocate a lot. My ligaments don't hold my joints in place. Um, and my muscles basically weren't strong about 2.5 years ago. And the physio had said to me, you need to build your muscles up. You need to get strong. Otherwise, you'll continue to dislocate. You'll be in chronic pain. You'll be in a wheelchair. At the time, I couldn't even roll over in bed because my back was so painful. And so I was like, oh, I don't really go to the gym. I really like the gym, but I don't. It doesn't give me enough dopamine to want to go every day. So I started pole dancing. And it took me 4 weeks to even lift both feet off the floor because I wasn't strong at all. It took me a year to climb to the top of the pole, but I would go 4 times a week. I would show up for myself. My body got strong. And my kids at school knew about this. I'd go in and they'd be like, oh, how's your rotator cuff today? Because I'd had an injury the night before. So also they were learning that actually sport's important, but moving my body not to shrink it but to strengthen it is really important. And that was the narrative, like I am registered disabled. I need to be strong. This is what I do because I love my body, not because I hate my body and I want to shrink it. Because I love my body, I want it to be healthy. So we always had this narrative. And so I started pole, and there was this one particular parent who, it's a really long story, and I won't really go
Yeah.
because the head teacher's still my best friend.
Yeah.
So there's no animosity with the school at all. But, but because I shared my pole journey online and I shared my artwork online, one of the parents didn't like it, and there's this thing about social media and blah 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 blah
Mhm.
blah blah blah. So I was told to take it down, take all my stuff down, change my name, or make my profile private, because I was sharing this pole dancing journey, and I'd have so many women because I'm a like as probably a size 18, doing pole dancing in a disabled body, nearly 50, and showing women you can still show up for yourself. You can do stuff that everyone else in that pole class is in their 20s, a size 8 or whatever. But still, I went, and I had so many women messaging me saying, oh, I've started outdoor swimming because of you. I've put a bikini on for the first time. I've gone out for a walk for the first time. It was this constant narrative of we move our bodies for love. We don't move our bodies to shrink them. Anyway, this particular parent didn't like it, went into the school and said, blah, 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 basically sexualized my
Yeah.
Instagram page, and nothing was sexual about it at all. Sexualized my Instagram page. And I got given these three options from the school, and I said, I'm not doing any of them, because if I do, I am putting out to the world that I have shame in my body, that I think what I'm doing is wrong, that I think that having a body and being a woman isn't okay. Existing as a woman isn't okay. I was a great teacher. Like, I was the parents. I've never had as many emails. I had about 600 emails after I left school, just from all the parents saying, we don't want you to go. You're the best teacher. We all believe in you. We all love you. It was just this one parent. Um, but that's the way the universe goes, right? I obviously wasn't meant to be at school any longer. But the thing I said, and I sent an email out to the parents, and the thing I said was, I've stood in front of your children for all these years talking about inclusivity, diversity, being yourself, showing up in this world as yourself, calling people out. We did an English lesson once where we did about the suffragettes. We were learning persuasive writing, and
Yeah.
I was like, right, let's do the suffragettes. I would bring things in. I had this t-shirt once and it said girls can do anything, and it was a really interesting conversation with the boys about the difference between equity and equality. Boys, of course, boys can do anything, but they're taught from the moment they're born that they can, whereas girls can't. So girls need that extra reminder. We had a great life, and I just said to these kids, and I said to the parents, this is going to be your final lesson from me. The one thing out of all the stuff I've ever taught you, to remember: you stick up for yourself, you don't shrink yourself or hide yourself because other people don't like it. You stand up for yourself. You speak your truth. If I'd hidden my page, if I'd gone down that route, I would have then stood in front of my class the next year and just been saying words.
Yeah.
How can I speak with my soul and my honesty and say, be yourself, don't worry about what everyone else thinks. Don't try and fit in. Live your truth. How can I say that if I know that I'm hiding my life because it's not deemed acceptable by society? So it was really hard. Like the way I speak about it factually, because that is what
Yes.
happened. There's a lot of emotion involved in it. I was really sad. I was really sad to leave the school.
When you were talking about how we're made to feel shame for our bodies, and this is just another way that we're made to feel shame for it. And if you have to back down from that at that point, you're saying, I agree with you, there is something shameful here, and there
Yeah,
is nothing
yeah,
shameful about it. And I'm actually just so thrilled to hear how much you're talking about strength there and talking about movement in our body, because and I'm honest with you, all of this stuff is really new to me. I'm just uncovering more and more about how important it is to be in our body. And at first for me it was like looking at bodies and looking at my body and actually accepting how it looked. And now I'm thinking, well, I want it to be strong, I want it to be healthy. I used to not like the gym and things like that, because I thought, oh, it's all just people looking all posh and posy. But now I'm thinking, no, it's not about that, and it's not about having a shape of a body. It's about being in your body and caring for it.
yeah. It's when you flip the narrative, it's
Yeah.
completely different. Weight Watchers is about, and I've been on every diet in the world, not just
Mm.
Weight Watchers. I've been on Slim as well. Weight Watchers. I've done remember that diet that Special K brought out, that if you ate
Yeah.
3 bowls of
Do you
cereal a day,
remember that advert though for
you'd
that?
lose
That they
weight.
were like, if you could pinch an inch, you should go on the Special K diet. There was like, I remember seeing that and thinking, and
Yeah,
I was probably
I
only like
know.
19 or 20, and thinking, oh my gosh, I could pinch more than an inch. I need to go on a diet. I
Yeah,
mean, awful, awful
yeah.
advertising.
It is, but when you flip the narrative, when
Yeah.
when dieting is restricting your food through hatred of your body. It's torturing yourself to shrink. Whereas eating healthily is
Yes.
completely different, because it's like, actually, I choose not to eat the chocolate. Don't get me wrong, I eat loads of chocolate. I have a life of 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 extremes as well, because that's okay. But sometimes I choose to eat healthily because I choose to nourish my body healthily,
Yes.
rather than I'm not stopping myself because of hatred, because I'm trying to shrink. And it's the same with exercise, rather than, I used to wake up every morning and go, fuck, I've got to go to the gym again, and oh god, and look, and then look in the mirror, and am I smaller, stepping on the scales every day, have I lost any weight, have I lost any weight, whereas now I exercise because I want to be strong, I want to be healthy, I want to meet my grandchildren when they come, I want to be running around with them. I love my body and want my body to be the best that she can possibly be. Don't get me wrong, I could go to the gym a lot more, I could do a lot more, to love my body even more. But it's when you flip in that narrative from hatred to love, that exercise and eating healthy food becomes beautiful, because it's not a punishment anymore. It's not a punishment, it's a reward. So it's not a punishment through hatred, it's a reward for love. So it's beautiful.
It's like an act of love, an act of devotion, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
really. You talk about goddess, goddess, and stuff like that. That's not something I'm really that familiar with, and might be my listeners are not very familiar with that either. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so I went to a Church of England school,
Mm.
secondary school. So again, I was brought up with God being a man, um, and God being up here and us being down here, and only able to be worthy of the crumbs at God's feet, because this man was so wonderful. We used to do Eucharist every week, we used to do Holy Communion, we were in church 3 times a week, at this school I went to. So that was all in my brain until I started unpicking it. And I was like, hang on a minute. Before Christianity, ancient, before God was a man, Goddess was a woman. Goddess was a woman. The women have this amazing potential to birth. We've got this portal of power, our vulvas. Listen, let me tell you this as well, just quickly, going off topic. When I was a teacher, we used to do, obviously, in the curriculum in PSHE, there's different sex education
Yeah.
that you have to do at different times. Never once in the curriculum are girls told that they possess a vulva. They think that they think that they possess a vagina. Vagina is not anatomically the correct word for what, we possess a vulva, we possess labia, we possess a cervix, but a vagina is a tiny part of what we've got. So boys are never taught that they just possess a penis. They're taught about the penis and the balls and everything, whereas girls, I was probably in my like 30s still saying, oh, this is my vagina. Actually, it isn't my vagina, this is my vulva. We're not even using the right terms for women's health, women's
Yeah.
reproduction, women's sacredness. Anyway, so going back to goddess, um goddess is like the matriarchal creation of this world. To me, one man being God doesn't resonate with me at all. That's patriarchal religion. That is bowing down to a man, whereas women, I follow the path of the goddess. So it's a pagan path. I follow the seasons. I honor the cycles of the moon. I honor my blood. I honor my cycles. They'll be coming to an end soon. So I honor them even more now. I work with magic. I work with the magic of a woman's body. I work with the magic of our blood cycles, our moon cycles, our wombs. Um, I am devoted to lots of different goddesses. I work a lot with the goddess Kali, who's the Hindu goddess of death and destruction, but also rebirth. I work with Rhiannon, the goddess of love, Mary Magdalene. I choose to find my inspiration from women, women goddesses. I choose to find my inspiration from women being in power rather than one man being in power. I choose to find my inspiration from the messages of Mother Earth, the messages of the trees. I choose my sanctuary to be my body and a forest, or the crashing waves on a beach. I follow this beautiful path, because also the difference in this goddess, I don't know, I'm doing goddess like this. The difference in this goddess culture and the goddess consciousness that I follow is that we are goddess and goddess is us. We are all one. We're all the same. We all possess the beautiful power that goddess possesses. It's not separate. For me, Christianity was separate. God was here, I was here.
Yes.
Whereas in this beautiful goddess, follow, this consciousness, I am goddess and goddess is me, and all women are joined. Everything is one. This world is one. If we're not looking after ourselves, we're not looking after everyone. We're all on this beautiful big web, and what we do ripples out. It makes a difference
Yeah.
to other places. The ancient pagan cycles followed the seasons, followed the different seasons, followed the lessons of the earth. At Christmas, which is now Christmas, it's Yule. At Yule is the time where nature goes and hibernates. So as humans in the ancient times, humans would hibernate and they'd regenerate and they'd recuperate and they'd have a lot of dream time, ready to come out of their homes again round about Imbolc, which is just when the new beginnings happen. And then the farmers would plant their seeds at the spring equinox, at Eostre, which is obviously now Easter, and then they'd put the love into it at Beltane, and then the water, and then it would come around to Lammas, where they would sow their seeds. So all these different seasons, the earth teaches us everything we need to know, and the earth is goddess is, mother earth, Gaia. I mean, now at the moment we're in the autumn equinox season. We're in the season of Mabon, and the trees are just letting all their leaves go,
All at the moment.
and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. So as a pagan, this is the time where a lot of the magic I'm doing now is about releasing,
Yeah.
releasing, letting go. The trees don't stand in terror and think, shit, am I going to grow new leaves again next year? Because they trust in the flow of the universe. So it's about releasing everything that you don't need, knowing that the newness is going to come to you, next year when the growth is there. So yeah, I'm just obsessed with goddesses. I'm obsessed with
I
painting women
I
into
have
goddesses.
become a
I'm
little bit
obsessed with this
obsessed with
divine
them lately
power.
as well. So I'm really into mythology and just myth in general, and I sort of started with just the myths that most people know from like the Greek myths and stuff, and then I started moving into finding out other myths, more like these like the pagans and stuff, and I'm like, well, this is really interesting. This is a different way of looking at stuff, and it's almost like you can see how society has changed to create this patriarchy, because the patriarchy isn't natural. It's not. We don't have
Yeah.
to live under a
No.
patriarchy. we can
No, it's
actually live on
man-made.
exactly, we can live under a different system. And when you start to look at these more ritual, the more cyclical, and it is just a different way of looking at the world. So yeah, I will be checking
Yeah,
out more about that.
yeah,
Thanks,
it's
Sophie, for
amazing.
so.
And you look at Venus of Willendorf. I'm just going to grab Venus of Willendorf.
Yeah.
This is Venus of Willendorf.
Oh
And
my.
she was one of the most ancient goddesses. I mean, this isn't the original, obviously. The original is about this big, but she was excavated from thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. You know, when people revered goddess as a wise woman, as a woman who was a medicine woman, as a midwife, you know, when women were revered, and you look at her shape, you know, her shape isn't like the women that we see now, but women were so honored in the ancient times. And then obviously the churches came over, Christianity began, all the temples were ripped down because the patriarchy know that women are strong. You know, women are powerful, women's voices make a change, so they tried to repress them. They tore down all the temples, you know, they banished paganism, and they banished the goddess consciousness, they banished the paganism, the goddess kind of ritualistic living, for this paganism where this one man could be in control. And actually, if you don't behave the way that God says, then you go to hell. You know, if you are good, then you go to heaven. You know, whereas and then what happened after all the temples were ripped down, and then the cycles came around again, and then there were the witch hunts. You know, the witch hunts that happened in Salem and in Pendle and all over Europe and all over the world, where women were accused of being witches for because they had animals, because they were midwives, because they used herbs, because they liked the moon. You know, I do, especially coming up to Samhain, I do a lot of magic and a lot of ceremony about the witch wound. And you know, a lot of women get together. Women were killed because of, you know, there was this one woman in particular that comes to mind. She couldn't fall pregnant, so she was killed because she was accused of bewitching her husband's penis, and he couldn't make her pregnant, so she was the witch, so she was killed. You know, so then the witch wound happened because they were trying. It's everything historically and has always been to repress women because women have power, you know, and the patriarchy doesn't like that, because the patriarchy thinks, hang on a minute, if women
Yeah.
are in power, they'll treat men as badly as we treat women, you know, so they try and repress women, they try and bring them down all the time, when actually it isn't about, because also I think if women ruled the world, it would be just as fucked. You know, it's about this balance. It has to be
It's
the
balance,
balance
isn't
between
it?
the divine feminine and the divine masculine. As a feminist, I'm not saying women are better than men, women should do rule the world. I'm saying you have to bring it into balance, because a male dominated society, a patriarchal dominated society, is not okay.
I know you've got 100 vulvas to do.
I
So,
absolutely do. I absolutely do. My next project is called Pussy Power, and it's
oh,
about, you know
fantastic.
what? I've painted 3,500 women, as you know.
Yeah.
I've never in my life, because also our vulva is a place where we went to shame, keep it hidden. You know, I've got 100 women who have sent me photos of their vulva. The majority of these women have never even looked at their vulva before.
Yeah.
They've never felt their vulva. They've never felt connected to it. They've never known that pleasure is okay. You know, we're taught like it's shameful, sex is shameful, or you have to perform a certain way, or your labia has to look exactly the same way. I am gobsmacked. I can't wait to release this project. I mean, you see behind me, I've only done
I'm
three so
just
far. They're
loving
all
looking at them.
completely different.
Yeah.
They're so completely different. I've never known. I didn't realize, even me, someone in this line of work, I didn't realize that our vulvas look so different. You know, all women need to see this, because we only get to see the, you know, the labiaplasty vulvas that are perfect or completely shaven, or we see that in porn. You either see vulvas in porn, or you see vulvas in like a medical textbook where it's either
Yes.
medical or pornographic. You know, we don't see real women's vulvas. And why is there shame? You know, why should there be shame around it? So this is a really exciting project, because again, it's like bringing diversity to women, just so women can go, wow, I don't have to feel shame. I can't, like, what does my vulva look like? Wow, it's our magic. This is our
Yeah.
most potent, most magical. You know, this our vulva is goddess. You know, everything everything is creation. We have these amazing portals where we can create, where we can birth, where we can, bring magic into the world. So that's why I'm currently painting 100 vulvas. It's called Pussy Power, and it's going to be an oracle deck
Wow.
next year, which is exciting.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
excited for that.
So that's
Very good.
yeah, that's my current project. And then I'm also working on Uprising, which is going to be that will be bodies, not vulvas. And I always start that in January for International Women's Day. So last year was Unapologetic, and I painted 150 women. And then we all came together in ceremony, and then in the evening there was the naked catwalk. So this year's is going to be Uprising. So I'm going to be calling out for models at some point, and then there's going to be a big naked event. I hire an auditorium, and it's an amazing way for women to celebrate each other, for women to see each other's bodies, for women to be seen, for women to step into their power in a place where they are not sexualized, in a place where they are safe, in a place where they can become authentic and use their voice and be in their body. And yeah, it's life changing. It's great.
So exciting. Do you know what? I really hope that I get the opportunity to work with you again in the future because I
Yeah,
have, and to
same.
have more conversations with you because I have loved just listening to you and hearing about your work and hearing about your journey. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
So much for having me. It's been lovely. As you can tell, I do talk a lot because I'm so passionate
Yeah,
about what I do. So we could probably do about 97 podcasts and I'd still be going like because it's just so
definitely.
important.
It is important. It is important. Thank you, Kat. This has been Unmuted. And if you would like to find out more about Kat's work, I've linked her website in the show notes. I recorded this a few weeks ago, and after our conversation, I decided to buy some of her goddess cards, and they are really beautiful and wonderful. I can't recommend them enough. Really high quality, absolutely beautiful. As women, how we view our bodies can affect many other aspects of our lives. And that desire to shrink physically our bodies can also show up as playing small in our work and in other aspects of our lives. I've got a couple of free events in the Unmuted Lounge where I'm opening up the conversation about this. On January 27th, I've got an event called Bad Dates and Breakups. It's to meet our inner lover and start some practices to restore real self love. Later in February, I'm doing a short event called Body Confidence in the Age of Ozempic, where I'll be talking through practical ways to stay confident in our body despite the pressures of society to shrink. So if you want to join the lounge for guaranteed access to free events, please go ahead and do that now. Again, I'll have linked that in the show notes. If you want to join the speakeasy where we go deeper, also linked in the show notes. And if not, look out for Facebook, Eventbrite Meeting Place, where you can also get public tickets to these lounge events that are free. But if you definitely want to secure a place, being a member of the lounge is the way to do that. Anyway, this is where I stop talking, but the conversation continues in the lounge.